And if you have any doubt about that, if your doctor's never talked to you about staying away from anything that raises your blood sugar, consider this. Has anybody heard of a PET scan? You know how a PET scan works? PET scan is very simple, very elegantly designed. A PET scan is an injection of radioactively labeled sugar into the body. Now what happens when you inject radioactively labeled sugar? When you inject any sugar in the body puts out insulin. Remember I talked to you about it. If you eat sugar, you ingest it, or you inject it, the body will put out insulin. Insulin attaches to receptors called insulin receptors. And cancer cells have many more insulin receptors than normal cells. So if your body puts out insulin, it attaches preferentially to the cancer cell receptors. When that receptor is attached to insulin, the door of the cell opens. And the cell becomes much more permeable. Now you have more insulin receptors, more doors. So when you put insulin in a person's body, now you have the doors to the cancer cells are wide open. When you do a PET scan, you've injected sugar, radioactively labeled sugar. It causes an insulin response in the body. The doors to the cancer cells are much more open than the normal cells. Guess where the sugar concentrates? In cancer. Now, when you do a scan, because it's radioactive, you see it light up in the cancer. That's the way doctors diagnose cancer. That's the most sophisticated cancer diagnostic test available now. But just think of it just a little bit differently. Forgetting about a test now, what happens when we eat sugar every day? What happens when we eat refined carbohydrates every day? That rise in blood sugar goes straight to the cancer and feeds it. Cancer concentrates sugar, it loves it. The insulin also attaches to this growth factor on cancer that makes it grow faster. So it's a double whammy. It not only gets more nutrition for the cancer, but it gets this growth spurt. It's really like pouring gasoline on a fire. So I'll reiterate, refined carbohydrates and sugar are poison. It's not just that they're, a little bit it's just poison. Yeah, if you want to eat a little poison, you're probably not going to poison yourself as much. But they're not really food. They were never food is what our ancestors ate. Food is what we're genetically programmed to eat, what we've been eating for 2.5 million years as hunter-gatherers. Food is whole food. Food is food that looked like it did, when you picked it out of the garden. Food is vegetables, fruits, nuts and seeds. And, animals were killed by our hunter-gatherer ancestors. But the animals were not stuck into feedlots given pesticide-laden grains. They were eating their natural foods, which was plants. I mean, cows graze on grass. They don't eat grains. You stick them in a feedlot and you give them grains. Every farmer knows it'll make them twice as fat, just the way humans get fatter when they stuff themselves with grains. So the cows get fat and, they're worth more. So true health, you have to start looking at food, what real food is. Another poison is high fructose corn syrup. How many people think they're not exposed to high fructose corn syrup? You're way ahead of me now. I can't even fool any of you. Some people really eat a very pure diet and avoid high fructose corn syrup pretty much completely. It's not present in whole foods, by the way. High fructose corn syrup is a way that industry has found out to cheaply sweeten foods. And it's in almost everything processed. If you look down the labels, you'll see high fructose corn syrup or fructose. They won't necessarily call it fructose corn syrup or high fructose corn syrup, but it'll say fructose. It's present in almost all processed foods. Why is high fructose corn syrup poison? It turns out that it induces a fatty liver. It doesn't cause an insulin response. And so you have a huge blood sugar shift without the body's even ability to cause an insulin response. The liver tends to be overloaded with this stuff and causes fatty livers and actually induces diabetes. High fructose corn syrup may be one of the prime culprits for why there's been an epidemic of diabetes in our country. Yes? Yeah, I've seen it. Right. Just like sucralose is natural, it's made from sugar. Yeah, it's chlorinated sugar. Chlorine is one of the poisons that we can talk about. It's a thyroid poison. Anybody realize that there's an epidemic of hypothyroidism in this world? I mean, it's this country for sure. Everybody's hypothyroid. Everybody's on thyroid. And half the people on thyroid don't even feel any better. The problem with chlorine and fluoride and bromine, all of our baked goods are brominated now. They used to be iodinated. Bromine, chlorine, and iodine are in the same column of the periodic table as iodine. They're all bromine, fluorine, chlorine, and iodine, the same column. They can actually substitute for each other. If you eat a lot of chlorinated foods, I shouldn't call them foods, chlorinated substances, they will substitute for the iodine in the thyroid gland and make for inactive thyroid hormone. The same goes for bromine, the same goes for fluorine. Yes? Avoid, yeah. Chlorinated pools are poisonous. Yeah. Chlorinated pools, you breathe it in. It's very bad for your lungs. Absolutely. There are newer systems. There actually is a salt system which reduces the chlorine content by about 95%. And it doesn't taste chlorinated, doesn't smell, your hair doesn't smell, your clothes don't smell. Look, I'm not pretending that this is easy. I'm not pretending that we can avoid everything. One of the other things I talk about is stress. And that's why I don't want to depress everybody. What I want to do is try to educate people. And I don't want to overwhelm you with do too many things at once, but educate yourself. Pick out one of these areas. Focus on them. Little by little by little, you can clean up your lives and make yourself healthy. Vibrant health is within your reach. This is your birthright. Your genetics are actually set up for you to be truly healthy. If you just live according to that genetic code. That genetic code was honed over 2 million years. We had a very stable genetic environment in terms of our food supply. I mean, we exercised in bursts to try to get food or try to get away from our predators. We ate whole foods, and we exercised regularly, just in order to survive. Start to live according to those tenets, and you'll truly be healthy. It feels now like, oh, God, I don't want to have to think about food that way, and I don't want to have to, exercise every day. But when you're really doing all that, it doesn't feel like a chore anymore. It feels like you left those kind of cravings behind, and you're feeling much better. Yes?
You said soy and what were the other?
Soy, corn, canola. About 93% of canola, mostly from Canada, is genetically modified, and cottonseed. But as I said, even though these are the things that are known to be genetically modified, unless they're called organic, there's contamination probably happening right as we speak. Not probably, definitely happening right as we speak, this pollination. This may be there was a researcher who said this could be a disaster worse than anything else, anything known to man. This type of pollution is worse than carbon pollution, worse than anything else, and nobody is talking about it. Because if our whole food supply is poisoned in this way, and our bodies start to react the way the animals react, we'll all be sterile, and most of us will be dead.
Does that include like organic tofu and organic soy milk?
No, organic tofu supposedly is not genetically modified. Now,
Soy milk?
that's another issue. Soy and tofu are not necessarily the healthiest foods. I've talked about that before. They have a lot of enzyme inhibitors. If you're going to eat soy or tofu, soy rather, products, you're probably better off looking toward the fermented, traditional Japanese fermented products like miso, tempeh, natto. Those are a more natural way of getting rid of these enzyme inhibitors. And they're not so high in these isoflavones. They seem to have some health benefits when they're taken in small amounts. In large amounts, the isoflavones are pro-estrogenic, and there's some questionable evidence that they might even stimulate breast cancer.